Thanks for joining me on episode 669 of the Inspired Stewardship Podcast.
I'm Joel Hallbaker, teacher, speaker, and author of Inverted Leadership. I challenge you to invest in yourself, invest in others, develop your influence, and impact the world by using your time, your talent, and your treasures to live out your calling. Having the ability to lead through confident humility is key, and one way to be inspired to do that is to listen to this, the Inspired Stewardship Podcast with my friend, Scott Mader.
But simply looking to get a little bit better every day. And as your energy improves, as your focus improves, as your mindset improves, as your view on others and yourself improves, everything begins to change. And you have a process, not an event, that changes your life.
Welcome and thank you for joining us on the Inspired Stewardship Podcast. If you truly desire to become the person who God wants you to be, then you must learn to use your time, your talent, and your treasures for your true calling. In the Inspired Stewardship Podcast, you will learn to invest in yourself, invest in others, and develop your influence so that you can impact the world.
In today's episode about developing your influence through stewarding your talent, I talk with you about having a process mindset. I share why this lets you not get frozen by perfectionism, and I give you some tips on how to trick yourself into having this view.
You've heard me talk about developing your talent, and one of the best ways to do that is through books. But if you're like most people today, it's hard to find the time to read. And that's why today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Go to inspiredstewardship.com/audible to sign up, and you can get a 30-day free trial. There's over 180,000 titles to choose from, and you can pick one and listen your way to developing your talents via Audible. That's inspiredstewardship.com/audible to get your free trial and listen to great books the same way you're listening to this podcast.
Having a process mindset. You know, when we talk about mindset, you hear different ways of labeling it. And I don't think there's necessarily one or right answer or one right way of looking at it. I often think that they're just different ways of labeling a relatively complex system that we have about how we view the world. I've talked before about having a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. And today I want to talk about the idea of having a process mindset versus an event mindset. You know, the truth is there's some similarities here, and it's really probably just another way of slicing kind of that same look. And the other thing I want to point out is often we set these up in pairs, you know, fixed versus growth, process versus event. And the truth is it's more complex than that. We don't really have just two competing mindsets. We usually have dozens and dozens of different ways of viewing the world. I truly believe that oftentimes the way we think about the world creates the reality that we see, not because there is no truth, but because it's less about what is true and more about how we view it. How do we look at the world? How do we put labels on the world around us? You know, if you think about it, when you think about events versus process, this is kind of how I look at it. Are you looking for a quick fix? Are you looking for the sudden change that changes your life night and day? Are you looking for incremental improvement? Are you looking for just things getting a little better every day? You know, both of those involve change. In both cases, you started with one condition and you end with another condition. But one of them is recognizing that change can be and maybe should be a slow, gradual process over time. And the other is having a tendency to look at change as something that comes upon us suddenly. You know, I was one way and now I am another. And no doubt, there are events in our life that can come along and be triggers and create massive change in our life. You know, if a family member passes away suddenly, that is a life-changing event. If you go through a divorce, that is a life-changing event. And these things can come upon us suddenly. But at the same time, oftentimes change comes about, especially improvement, which is really what I want to focus here, through slow, gradual processes. Going to the rally that suddenly brings your attention to things doesn't usually create change that sticks. This is one of the reasons that I have a problem with some of the kinds of, life event kind of processes that people use, where it's go to this weekend event and it's going to change your life. It often brings energy to your life. It brings a sudden realization to your life. But to create lasting change, you have to take those things from that event and integrate them into your daily life. And that usually takes time. Building a habit, building systems, building a process is something that takes time. It's one of the reasons I think we're uncomfortable with it, is because we don't see that change. Think about a child who's growing up. If you only see that child once a year, the amount of change that happens between day one and 365 days later is massive. But if you're living in the same house with that child and you're seeing them each and every day, that slow and gradual change isn't as obvious. And it sometimes takes people from outside to point out to you how dramatically things have changed. When we look at things to be an event, when we look at things to suddenly be from where it is to where it should be or where we want it to be, and we want it to happen with one fell swoop, that causes us to begin to look at things from a tools perspective, from a how perspective. We try to find the quick fix. We try to find the thing that's just going to make all of this go away or all of this become new in one fell swoop. We also have a tendency to begin to look for things to be perfect. We hold ourselves up against a status and an idea of perfection. We can't accept any mistakes or any failure because we're trying to go from state A to state B with nothing in between. Anything less than perfection is not acceptable. Anything less than total change is not acceptable. But when you look at it as a process and you begin to recognize the fact that it's not about A and B in one sudden switch. It's about, have I moved closer to B today? Have I taken a step on that path from A to B? It's more focused on the journey that you take than it is about the destination or the starting point. It allows you to have those days where things just don't work right and not beat yourself up as much. It keeps you from getting frozen by this idea of this night and day switch and achieving perfection in one fell swoop, and just begins to let you focus on slow and constant improvement. And the truth is, you can trick yourself into beginning to move towards these sorts of things. And trick maybe is not the best word for that, but you can begin to set your mind up to begin to view things a little bit more that way. You have to notice that you have the ability to change. You have to notice that you and others are not the same today as they were yesterday. You have to notice that there's less than perfection in you and in others, and you have to accept that. And then you have to begin to face the challenge of change bravely and recognize it's not about achieving perfection. It's simply about incremental improvement. You have to begin to pay attention to how you think about the world, how you view the world. What language do you use to describe the world around you? And you have to recognize that you are gifted. There are things that you can do. There are things that you can say. There are things that you have inside of you that others value. And when you recognize that and begin to grow that, it allows you to begin to view not only yourself, but others in a much more loving and caring way. And as you begin to change your view of the world slowly, little by little, you're tricking and reprogramming your mind into not looking for the change that happens overnight, not looking for the event, not looking for the life-changing moment, but simply looking to get a little bit better every day. And as your energy improves, as your focus improves, as your mindset improves, as your view on others and yourself improves, everything begins to change. And you have a process, not an event, that changes your life. Thanks for listening.
Thanks so much for listening to the Inspired Stewardship Podcast. As a subscriber and listener, we challenge you to not just sit back and passively listen, but act on what you've heard and find a way to live your calling. If you like this episode on the stewardship of talent, you can go over to inspiredstewardship.com/talent and sign up for our 5-week series on the stewardship of talent. Or if you're in the U.S., you can text 44222 talent tips. That's talent tips to 44222 and get those tips. Until next time, invest your time, your talent, and your treasures. Develop your influence and impact the world.